Hello everybody and welcome again to our English lesson. Today our lesson will be about suffixes. So have you ever heard about it? And what is it? Okay, let's start to learn. What are suffixes? Suffixes are a letter or group of letters added to the ending of words to change their meaning or function. There are many suffixes used in English language to create a rich vocabulary. These suffixes change the meaning or grammatical function of a root word. For example, by adding the suffixes er and est to the adjective fond, you create the comparative fonder and the superlative fondest. Moreover, take the suffix ist. By adding this to a word, you have changed the word to describe a person who performs or practices something. So art becomes artist, which means a person skilled in a particular art. Now let's look at the verb read. This verb can be turned into a noun by adding the suffix er. So read becomes reader. Likewise, by adding the suffix able, the verb read now becomes the adjective readable. Now have a look at this picture, which describes the meaning of suffix. So here we have the base word, and here we have a suffix which is added to the end of the base word to form a new word with a new function or a new meaning. Here we have two examples of suffixes like full, which means full of, and here we have less, which means without. As we said, a suffix is added to the end of a word to make a new word. Now here we have some examples of suffixes like able, which means can be done, and here we have in, which means made of. Here we have full, which means full of. Here we have less, which means without. Here we have ed, and we add it to form the past tense of a verb. Here we have er to form a comparative or one who. Here we have meant, which means action or process. And finally, we have s or es to form the plural of a noun. Now let's talk about the using of suffixes. Suffixes create variety in the English language. They provide endless ways to express our thoughts, feelings, findings, and emotions. They morph nouns into adjectives and verbs into nouns. They express deeper qualities. And be aware that sometimes adding a suffix to a root word changes the spelling of the new word. Now let me give you some examples of the most common suffixes with nouns, with verbs, and with adjectives. And I will start here with noun suffixes. Here we have ear, which means engaged in something or associated with something. For example, volunteer and engineer. We have er, which means someone who performs an action. For example, help, it's going to be helper. Teach, it's going to be teacher. Here we have ion, ocean, which means the action or process of. For example, celebrate, it's going to be celebration. Here we have ity, which means the state or condition of, like responsibility. Okay, one more suffix. We have or, which means a person who is something. For example, translator. And finally, we have ship, which means position held. For example, ownership and internship. Now let's move to the adjective suffixes. Here we have able and able, which means capable of being. For example, predictable and credible. Here we have ary, which means relating to. For example, military. And here we have full, which means full of or notable of. For example, grateful and beautiful. Okay, here we have more suffixes with adjectives like IVE, which means quality or nature of. For example, expensive. Here we have less, which means without something. For example, hopeless. And finally, we have Y, which means made up of or characterized by. For example, tasty. Finally, let's come to the verb suffixes. And here we have the most common verb suffixes. I will start with ed, and it means the past tense version of a verb. For example, cold and mist. We have er or er, which means action or process, or making an adjective comparative. For example, faster, bigger, longer. Here we have ing, which means verb form, present participle of an action. For example, laughing, swimming, and driving. That's the end. Hopefully you enjoyed our lesson and see you again.